Welcome to Cascaded Composer's Composer Insights. And tonight we have Brian Magill giving us a presentation on a composition software. And we're going to have a roundtable here. Take it away, Brian. Thank you very much.
Okay. I have a little presentation. I'm going to share it here. Hopefully everyone will be able to see this. Just a second here. Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not too big. Okay. I'm giving Ted credit because he's here because he's a Dorico user and I don't know anything about Dorico, so he's here to help us answer questions. Just the things I want to talk about mostly are finale end of life, end of support, how to migrate scores, and then just a little overview of the software landscape as it stands right now. And then I'm going to do a little demo of NotePerformer and what it is and should you use it and so forth. And then we'll just have a general discussion of what topics anyone wants to cover. Okay, so Finale is end of life. Make Music is going out of business in about 9 months. There's no further enhancements to the software. There's no support for it. There's no more development for it in any way, shape, or form. If you run a frozen system that's perpetually stuck in 1999 or something, you could probably run Finale for a future amount of time. But if you run on regular Mac or Windows, then something will happen eventually. It's just going to make Finale not run after that. And if something comes out, they won't support it. So Make Music, the makers of Finale, they're recommending that people move to Dorico, not Dorigo. That's probably some kind of chip. I don't know. But anyway, they made a deal of some sort with Make Music, and however, Dorico and Sibelius are both offering currently a $149 special Finale migration prices on their software. So if you are thinking about moving, this is actually a really good time because that's about 60% off the retail price for both Sibelius and Dorico, which if you get the full-blown versions of those software, they're about $600 a piece. Now, migrating music. So the news here isn't terribly good. There is the best way is via Music XML, and this is a XML format that represents notes and other types of dynamics and other basic clefs and other sorts of information in XML format, and you can move that between various music softwares, but it's really covering only the basics. It's not going to migrate anything that's unique or unusual. It's not going to remember that in the 30-second measure, you had to move some stuff around and put in some extra spacing in order to make the notation you had in that measure, look right for the flute or something like that. It's relatively simple. It's going to get the notes. It's going to get accidentals, clefs, all the basic things, but any kind of additional notation, I think, is not going to be too represented. I'm going to try to do a little demo here of that in a bit. However, I only have 2 pieces of software running on my desk, so I can't test the whole run and the possibilities. So that's the situation with Finale. So what's left in the world of music notation? So I'm going to call out the pieces of software I'm aware of and that I think are notable. I mean, there's some other people that have done things, and if there's something I'm not representing here that people are aware of, let me know. But I don't know. I don't know everything. So the first one is MuseScore. And MuseScore is a free music notation software. The company that makes it, it's kind of crowdsourced, I guess, is the best way to. It's an open source system. It runs on Mac and it runs on Windows and it even runs on Linux if you want to run Linux. Um, it the company that hosts it and sells it makes money from plugins and sound libraries apparently, and but MuseScore itself is free. Seems fairly capable and full feature for something that's free. I downloaded it and played around with it a little bit, sort of to uh, get ready for this presentation, and I found that it was very Sibelius-like for note entry and editing. But the general way that things are laid out and the menus are constructed, I think, is a little more logical than Sibelius, which is a relatively illogical program. What I found was also that there are fairly limited symbols options. If you do a lot with engraving,
could be key to winning the presidential race next month. Our White House correspondent, Laura Barone Lopez, recently spent some time there. So, Laura, as you well know, President Biden won Arizona by just over 10,000 votes back in 2020. How's it looking now?
So, Greg, I think
this year polls show that Trump has a slight.
Again, thank you, Greg. So, anyway, I have a friend of mine who's a composer who wrote an entire symphony in MuseScore, and he made it work. It wasn't terribly complicated, but he did do it. And I would say that if your needs are relatively straightforward, you don't need to create your own symbols, you don't need to write music for unusual instruments or use notation that's somewhat specialized, like maybe for an organ or a handbell choir, you might find that MuseScore is a pretty good piece of software, and I can sort of bring it up here. I'll bring it up here in a bit if people want to take a look at it. So that's one option. Second option is Sibelius. It's been around for a long time. It has versions that range from free and completely useless to $600 for everything. It is via Avid, which is a company that likes to operate the way some companies do, where you pay a yearly annual licensing fee, and that just renews and gives you the new versions all the time. You don't have to do that. You can have a perpetual license and avoid getting a monthly fee. You can just buy a perpetual license for a particular version, and then you can upgrade it when you feel like it, which might be never if they don't do anything that you need or you don't have a problem with it. So I used this presentation as a relatively lame excuse to update to the most recent version of Sibelius Ultimate, which is 2024 6.1. I am a Sibelius user, and I mostly use it because when I started using it, music scoring software, there was no Dorico, and my choices were between Finale and Sibelius, really, and I disliked both of them, but the one I disliked less was Sibelius, and I decided I just would sit down and figure out how to use it, and I have figured out how to use it, and I've done a lot of work with it, and so I'm unlikely to change in the near future just because I've gotten so handy with it. And I think that is one of the things about music notation software that's unique. It's not like having a word processor where you can just go from one word processor to another word processor. Every notation software I've used has their own unique ways of doing things, and it's not terribly easy to just drop using one and move to another one. And music notation comes with its own problems when it comes to porting music notation and making scores in computers. There are a lot of possibilities, and there are a lot of symbols and a lot of things you can do that can make data entry very complicated. The ultimate version has, by the way, a scripting language with thousands of commands. Some are very specialized, like select all the notes in the score and assign the handbells needed to this particular note. If you're a handbell acquirer, it's a really big deal. You would use that, but if you don't, you'll never use it. Some are really useful. I particularly like their, rewrite all flats as sharps, right? Or rewrite all sharps as flats. That can be extremely useful if you're working through something with a lot of accidentals and you're trying to make your accidentals as logical as possible, or you decide, well, maybe I need to put this section into a particular key or whatever. It also supports every known specialized notation you can possibly think of. It's enormous capabilities, and so if you need to do something, you could probably do it in Sibelius. Dorico is the newest software option out there from a company called Steinberg, which has a long history of music software. There are versions that range from free and completely useless up to $579 for the pro version. It runs on top of a product called Steinberg Cubase, which some of you might be familiar with. This is what we would call a DAW, a digital audio workstation. So it's designed for recording and playing back audio. And what this gives you is a little bit cleaner system over an approach over how the program plays back what you've written. Now, ultimately, of course, we're writing scores, so we're going to have musicians playing our music back. But at least for me, it can make a big difference between listening to a string quartet with electronic beeps for the violins and piano and cellos and violas versus listening to some playback that actually approximates what a stringed instrument actually sounds like. So I think that is a strength of Dorico. Also, it's also written by the former Sibelius team. So the people who wrote Sibelius also wrote Dorico, and they were hired by Steinberg after Abbott fired them and farmed out all of its development to a team in Ukraine. So they've written both Sibelius and Dorico. The final thing I would say is the full versions of Dorico or Dorico, by the way, I don't know how you pronounce it, and Sibelius are pretty close in capabilities as far as I can tell. I couldn't really come up with anything that you could do in Dorico that you couldn't do in Sibelius and vice versa. The only other thing I know of, it's a piece of music software, which I didn't include here because I don't think too much of it, is something called Music Jotter, which claims a novel input method. But the problem with that software is it doesn't seem to have nearly as much enough depth of capability to be something you would want to write maybe a long piece of music with, an opera or something. Is there any other piece of software out there that people are using that I didn't include here? Okay. So how many people are using Finale today? to do all their scoring. Everybody?
Yeah.
Anybody? Quite a few. I actually realize I can't tell what people said. Is there like a
I
hand
saw one
raised?
person raise their hand.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so you're the person
I raised my hand to put my thumb down.
Somewhere on Zoom, there's a polling mechanism, I'm sure, or at least if it's like
there used to be a place, something you could do where you could poll people, but I'm not sure where it is.
Maybe we're not paying them enough money to, get to
Yeah, we had to get the deluxe version or something in
Yeah.
order to get that feature. At any rate, so anyway, those are the kind of choices I see out there, and like I said, both Dorico and Sibelius have like versions of their software that are less expensive that have more limited capabilities. I'll just describe the case that I ran into that caused me to upgrade from Sibelius Lite or whatever it was called at the time. They keep changing the names to the full version of Sibelius. And the case was I was writing something in 7/8 time, and I wanted the barring of the or the beaming of the eighth notes to be 2 + 2 + 3, not anything different, right? And the only option I had, I think, was 3 + 2 + 2. It was the default option, but I wanted the meter, I wanted the beaming to reflect the stresses, right, in the odd meter, and there was simply no way to do that in the cheap version of Sibelius. In the expansion version of Sibelius, and in Dorico too, you can define virtually any time signature you want, divide it up any way you want, with any numerator and any denominator you want, and you can define how the beaming occurs for each note type, right, if that's important to you. So anyway, so that's the current horizon of stuff. Let's see. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about NotePerformer. So this is a separate $129 notation playback plugin that works with Finale, Dorico, and Sibelius. So most playback you would hear in a notation software is going to be a sample or a synthesized version of some instrument, like the violin or the piano or something, that is going to play each of the notes in your score. And generally it's something that's fairly simplistic. It maybe uses MIDI under the hood or something like that. And there isn't a lot of understanding of various notational and expressive notation you might have in your score that would be easily understood by a real player, but it isn't very well understood by a computer. So instead of that, this is actually an AI-generated instrument sound, and their timbre, dynamics, and articulation are all derived from the symbols in the score. And it doesn't do everything. I mean, you could generate I could think of a number of string techniques you could write, like maybe flattando or something like that, or although it does do sol tasto and sol ponticello, so that's impressive. But it doesn't do all those kind of details things. But for most things most people write, it does a very good job. And the other thing it does is if you create a score, like say a symphonic score, and you say, okay, I've got, I don't know, 4 flutes in this symphonic score. I've got flute 1 and 2. I want that on one stave, and I want flute 3 and 4 on another stave or something. Or I've got 4 staves. NotePerformer will see that and it'll say, well, they've got 4 flutes, but we don't have 4 flute players. I mean, we will have 4 flute players. So I'm going to vary the sound of all 4 flutes to be slightly different from each other. I'm going to change the articulation slightly. I'm going to change the timing a little bit to reflect the fact that there would be 4 different musicians playing those 4 instruments, those 4 flutes, and that will sound more realistic in regards to what the final sound would be. And my experience is it sounds best with orchestral scores and symphonies. The more things you get in there, it's quite remarkable actually at that level. It's not as convincing to me with individual instruments. I use it. I really like it. I'll never go back because I feel like I get a lot better dynamics and expressions during playback, and I get a lot more realistic articulation of individual notes, especially for string parts, because a violinist is not going to just take a quarter note and just start it instantly at the very beginning of the note and play it at the same loudness to the end of the quarter note and then just stop immediately, like square, right? That's what computers do, but it's not what violinists do. And for me, NotePerformer does a pretty good job of making it sound more and phrasing it more like a violinist might actually play it. Now, having said that, this system will not be replacing real musicians anytime soon. I can assure you that. It's not going to fool anybody into thinking that real musicians are playing it, but I found a noticeable improvement based on making NotePerformer play the notes rather than what was built into Sibelius. So I'm going to see if I can demonstrate this. Let's see here. Let's see, how do I get over? Oh, that's good. You're not letting, this is not very good. Okay, hang on. I'm going to have to unshare for a second here. Thought this would be a little better at this than now. Okay, so let's see here. Give me a second. Let's start with. Okay. Let me share and see. All right. Here we go. Okay. So I'll get to my own horn a little bit and let you listen to a little bit of my string quartet number 2. So the first thing I need to do in Sibelius to do this is go here under playback devices. So in most audio software now, if you have various plugins for VST installed on your computer and you use audio workstations and things like I do, then it'll all show up here. What I'm going to do up here is switch from Sibelius. Actually, I'm going to start with Sibelius 7 sound. So I come in here, I can switch to NotePerformer, and NotePerformer automatically looks at my score. It sees what I have here, and it's gonna just figure out what instruments it needs here. So you don't have to do anything. You can get very elaborate with this and come in here and assign individual things individually. You can load all sorts of plugins and things to do it, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to start with the actually maybe I should use the chamber sound. That's probably makes more sense. Okay. So I'm going to play, see if this works.
When you share the screen, you have to check on sound, share sound.
Oh, you have to check on share sound.
You have to do that. Go back out of your share and come in. When you first come in, on my screen, it's on the right, but we know that everything is different from everybody.
Okay, let's see, share sound. And I will admit, I'll admit that it may not be detectable as a difference because of the audio quality we have here. So let me see if I can share.
See if you put
So you click on
sound.
share and share sound is there.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. I'm just trying to see if there's a better. Let me.
I'm noticing on my Zoom, I've got this setting for original sound for musicians on the upper right of the screen. I toggled it on. I don't. It seems like maybe everybody has to do that individually.
Okay, is it a?
That works for the person. Original sound works for the person who is actually sharing.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, let me stop a second and see if I can make that set up. Okay, hang on, just about here.
I don't think you need original sound for this, but you do need sound share or share sound.
Okay, this should work.
I'm not hearing it.
How do we get rid of the echo? Ted, I think you solved that problem once in the past. I think it's one person who has something changed. Oh, the echo is gone?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But the sound, we can't hear the sound.
Oh, yeah, we can't hear the sound.
So when you first open share screen, you have to click on share sound from that point.
I know, Brian, can you hear us? Brian?
I don't think he hears us.
Here.
Brian, are you
Anyway,
there?
I just wanted to give a demonstration here. Let me switch over NotePerformer.
Brian, we couldn't hear anything.
And see if this sounds better.
Can somebody get through to him? I typed it out.
Hey, Brian, are you hearing us at all right now?
No, he's not.
He's not. Let's put in the chat, Brian.
I sent him a note in chat, but I don't think he saw it.
Yeah,
I put something in chat too.
and apparently
Let's wave him down.
your volume is down.
The problem is the share screen, share sound.
Maybe if we all wave him down.
Maybe everybody wave furiously at once.
I don't think it.
No, he's
Brian,
waving
stop.
back. All right. Are you
Stop.
sure? Yeah, Brian, we can't we can't communicate with you. Zoom is so much fun.
Okay, I'll see if I can send a note. And then the echo is still in there.
Maybe we can use sign language. Also see if I can tell.
Oh,
No sound.
Ryan, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. It said not.
We couldn't hear any
You told me
sound.
to turn
We're
up
playing at
the.
either time.
You couldn't hear it either time, huh? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
And I think the echo is coming from you, Brian. Do you have something?
That's interesting. I'm not hearing an echo.
You know, you could always just play it through your local microphone. It's not so good, but at least we'd be able to hear something.
I just, this is such a continuous problem in this meeting. And I thought I would be immune with it because I'm the guy who has 27 years of software engineering experience, but I guess not.
That's the reason it's happening to you. You realize.
Right.
Yes.
It's
And it
karma.
always will happen at this kind of situation where you're presenting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's almost more like a reverb than an echo.
Yes, and I think we figured out that if Brian has his speaker in his earphones slot or vice versa.
Well, my problem is I'm just using my computer, so if I turn off my sound, you won't hear me.
No, just start the share again and choose share sound before you click on your manuscript.
Okay, that's what I've got.
Did you choose share sound?
Yes. Let's see if this works.
No. We still don't
No.
hear it.
Did you hear anything or not?
No.
No.
Hang on a second. I have another idea. Just a second. Wonder if I have to.
Are there really folks here who are not familiar with NotePerformer and what it sounds like?
Yes, but
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I've not barely even heard of it.
Okay.
chances are with Zoom, we're not going to be able to hear how really good it is anyway.
That's what my primary fear was before I even started with this. So, especially if we have to go to microphone quality, and you're not going to be able to hear the difference between the two anyway, because the fidelity is going to be so low. Well, so let's just move on here. Let me stop sharing. No, I'm not sharing at all.
I suddenly got a window in my screen. Does anyone else have a message from Zoom? Let's see, requesting to bypass the system private window?
No,
Nobody
No.
else has that?
No.
no.
Then I'll
Okay.
just ignore it. I'll move it out of the way.
Okay, so I guess what we'll do is just throw it open for general discussion. I know that Ted is using Dorico, so I thought maybe we could hear from Ted a little bit about what his experience is with Dorico and whether he likes it or not. Ted?
Sure. I can talk very off the cuff and very limited to my particular experience, and there very well could be people on this call with different experiences and with even more. I'm suspecting it, but I was a Sibelius user. I actually used, I think, the very first version of Finale a very long time ago, or one of the first versions. But I was using Sibelius for some years, and I got tempted to switch over to Dorico in spite of the what Brian was saying. It's like, it's kind of harder to switch if you're used to something. I was always frustrated with Sibelius because I really like shortcut keys. And after talking to somebody who's a Dorico user, I was interested to try it out. And I think this is the real great strength for me personally. I can step enter music really quickly with Dorico, especially once you learn the shortcuts. They're just a lot less. The ones in Sibelius are really tedious and involve you holding down 3 keys at a time or 2 or 3 just to do the simplest of things. And Dorico puts some emphasis on making that easy. And I can not only enter notes, but recently I was finding some more of the features I wish I'd realized before, where you can do things like edit durations on the fly and do various things. So you can crank through a lot of music pretty darn quickly if you're entering that way, and I find that to be really useful. Let's see. I think you can probably get most of what you need, just about anything. I don't think they've got just everything fleshed out the way that you've got on your longer existing notational programs like Sibelius or Finale while it still exists. And I've been frustrated occasionally by a couple things that I've wanted to do that I wasn't, I guess in a couple cases, wasn't quite able to make happen. What I would say is they seem to be making improvements consistently. I like the researching. It seems to me, maybe this is by memory more because it's been a little bit since I've used Sibelius now, but it seems to me I might get frustrated looking for what I want to do, but if I Google search it, usually pulls up their help menus, and I'm impressed how much of the time that I can find what I want that way. Also, I think that they're a little bit more, what's the word for it? You have to work a little bit harder if you really want to do something different than the way they want to set it up. Sometimes that's easy, like they'll change the notes when you're editing them if it simplifies the notation. If you're tying a couple of quarter notes together, it might change it to a half note for you. And there are ways you can freeze things if you need it, which sometimes you do. But I find in some situations I've had that reformatting the way they don't want to do is even harder than it was in Sibelius. It kind of really draws you back towards that doing things from a top-down level. You don't want to, and this was the thing I found in Sibelius. You could go and do all this reformatting, but you would work yourself into a bind where anytime you touch the score, you were screwing everything up. And it really wasn't Sibelius that you had to do things more thoughtfully and in a certain order. And I would say Dorico to my mind. I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me it kind of forces you to think more layer wise.
So Ted, when you're doing data entry, are you um, doing the computer keyboard, or are you using like a MIDI keyboard to do note entry?
I'm using a computer keyboard. That's what I personally like doing. That because to me, like I don't have a studio set up one computer most of the time. So that may be different than others. So I don't find it as convenient to have a with a piano keyboard. I want to be able to do it straight from a computer keyboard.
Interesting.
And
I much prefer the piano keyboard, maybe because I'm a piano player. But Sibelius has, if you have a piano keyboard, it's pretty fast and pretty simple on the keypad to select your note values and so forth. And it does get some getting used to. I mean, it's hard.
I'm talking about step entry from your typing keyboard. There's a few reasons I find that you've got to find what works for you. Everybody's experience is going to be different.
Right.
This is what I wanted to do and what worked for me. So that's my situation.
Mm-hmm.
Dorico also has keyboard entry.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Just like I want to be able to take my laptop somewhere and not have to go MIDI something in and get all the settings right and then reboot my computer twice to get everything to talk to each other. That's kind of where I'm going. When I do step entry from the keyboard, I'm ready to just do it anytime without getting slowed down by any of those considerations. But again, that's my situation.
And can I interject something, Brian? I like you. I have a little keyboard, a piano keyboard that I use, but I was having some trouble with the score, and I got some help from the community. And somebody in Australia really helps a lot with Sibelius. And he pointed out that when we use that keyboard, the Sibelius takes not just the note that we want it to take, but it takes I guess the velocity of the key itself from the keyboard. And so I would have some keys that a playback that would come out louder. And
Oh yeah.
So he was trying to convince me then to just use only either the keyboard within Sibelius or something else,
Well, I mean, I don't. There's a one button to turn off that playback, right? I mean, I never use the playback that plays the velocities back. I just turn it off, and then it only plays back the dynamic markings that I put into the score.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll have to experiment with that then. Because to me, it's a lot easier to use the keyboard. You just go, and I put it in note by note, but a chord note being and
yeah, it's just a configuration setup, right?
Yeah.
And because Sibelius and I think Finale too they've always had this feature with real time. You're supposed to be able to like sit down and play a piece of music on your keyboard, and then it's supposed to transcribe it. But that has never, ever, ever worked.
No,
not for me.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And
so what about Dorico in this situation?
For real-time entry, yeah, I haven't even tried it. I don't have any. Yeah, I don't see any reason to mess with real-time entry.
Yeah, the real-time. If you don't mind me butting in there, the real-time entry, you can set the quantization level pretty easily on that in the lower left-hand corner. Does that make sense? Any of those screens.
I've
tried
that
helps the real-time, but
it still
if you have something really intricate, good luck.
I've done the same thing. I've tried the quantization. Yeah. Now, I have multiple digital audio workstations, things like Pro Tools and Bitwig. They are way better at quantization than any of the notation software is. And the best result I've ever had is if I want to do that, I'll play something into my DAW and then I'll quantize it after the fact, which gets things about 95% what I want, right? And I mean, quantization is always subject to sort of like the nearest available, subdivision of the beat, and sometimes it'll put it in the wrong place. And then if I export that into MIDI and then into Sibelius, it comes in very, very cleanly. But that's a lot of work to, it's more work to do that than it is to just type it in. So I don't do it very much. Let's see.
Yeah, it's nice for like a series of whole note chords or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're not too precise, and you can play like a computer, like just a machine that comes down at exactly the first beat of the measure and so forth. But human beings don't really play music that way. We keep good rhythm and time, but it's surprising if you just record and you go look and see where people play notes, they don't line up very well with what the computer thinks is the beat. So yeah, like I said, I do think that Sibelius has made a lot of improvements. One improvement they have not made is they just keep adding more stuff, and their user interface, they won't take anything away, I guess, because they think people want to use it when there are far more logical ways to do it. So if there can be like 3 different ways to do something in Sibelius, and they're all available. And the interface to me has gotten very, very cluttered. I also use a lot of keyboard shortcuts in Sibelius when it comes to things like dynamics, anything besides notes, I'm always using the keyboard shortcuts. I'm never dragging hairpins. I'm never putting pianissimos or anything in there. I'm always using the keyboard shortcuts for all that stuff, and it works pretty well. Try to cut down on the mouse clicks, but there are a lot of mouse clicks in Sibelius. If you want something special, like what was it I had to use? I wanted a mordant in a particular piece of keyboard, and I had to go through menu after menu after menu to find the symbol that was, on the 17th menu and the 12th page, and there it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could do it, but it took forever to find the thing.
In Dorico, it's on the right-hand panel and totally obvious. And use one click for the category and another click for it more.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think that's one of the areas where Dorico and in MuseScore, for that matter, do a lot better job.
And I'd like to say when I Google for things in Dorico, my memory right now, which could be off, I feel like I find things actually fairly quickly, usually in their own documentation. I don't know, somebody might say that Sibelius has all that. Maybe they've gotten better at it.
Yeah, I many times I'll Google something that rather than go through the manual for Sibelius, I'll just Google it. Where is it? And I find it right away, or go to the community. They're really good helpers.
Yeah, there is a good community for Sibelius too.
Has anybody else heard the story that when the whole Sibelius crew got fired and went over to Steinberg, that Dorico is essentially the way they wish they had done Sibelius.
Well, as a software engineer, every once in a while you get a chance to do something for the second time, and I can tell you, it's a great privilege because you know exactly how you want to do it the second time. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. You know everything you got wrong the first time.
The biggest change they made is super significant, which is to organize things by players instead of by staves.
Mm.
And I would like to ask Brian, do you still have to make different scores for parts and different score for playing? Like in Sibelius, I used to have to make 3 different scores to get the sound I wanted, parts I wanted, and the master score I wanted.
So I think it's a lot better than it used to be, Mark. I find it used to be you really had to fiddle around with the parts in Sibelius to get them, at least I did, to get things to come out the way you wanted. But they have some automated layout stuff now that works a lot better than it used to.
Yes.
And I also find it's much easier for me to make parts if I want to adjust page turns, right? I say I don't want 4 systems on this page. I want to move this system over to this next page, right? I want these these saves group together for this part, right? It's really fast and easy to get those over there, and I don't spend nearly as much time horsing around with parts as I used to.
So you can do everything in one score now, in one file?
Well, I will have, it depends. Usually I will have a score. I will get they will give you default parts, and I usually end up with another set of parts because I want to make adjustments, right? So if I have a string quartet, they'll say, okay, here's your violin part, and I won't like it. So I will make a new part and adjust it. So I usually have two parts, but sometimes I don't have to do that. Sometimes the part that Sibelius comes up with is perfectly fine. And like most of what I do, I really only have to, like I say, adjust for page turns and, maybe a few other things. It generally comes out pretty good.
Yeah. I see that Beth has a question.
Yes.
Let's see. I want to go back. Beth, I lost it. Somebody else.
Oh, about XML. Let me.
Oh, Beth, in Finale.
Yeah, I wanted to know about converting the scores to XML because I read that if you do that, you have to have the settings right or it doesn't come out so that you can open it in Dorico, or it's so messed up.
It should be. I'm not sure what so does anybody have a copy of Finale? I know that in Sibelius it's really straightforward, and I have tested exporting something from using XML from Sibelius and then importing it back into Sibelius, and it seemed to work fine. It didn't have any trouble. It didn't import everything that was part of the score. That's the only problem. It just forgot a few things it didn't know about. But if I go here to let me share this just a second.
I'm seeing a help article on exporting from Finale. Just drop it in.
Yeah, if you happen to be going to Dorico, and it might be the same with Sibelius, like Dorico has a really great users forum, and on there's been just a deluge of articles and posts by Finale users moving to Dorico, and people are creating special scripts to help with the transition and all kinds of things. So if you're going to Sibelius, maybe something similar exists for Sibelius.
That's true. I mean, like in my option from here, I could basically just export something, and I don't have a lot of setting controls over what's there. Now, if I come in here and open something.
Oh, thank you for the article, Ted.
You're welcome.
Where did it go? And I wanted to see what this did.
When I switched from Sibelius to Dorico, I saved everything I had in my library into XML, and so I can recover it, in Dorico. And it's worked. I didn't have high expectations, and it met them. It works pretty well.
I concur with that. I've done probably less than Kevin's saying. I've converted a couple of scores, but yeah, it's did a reasonable job.
I thought that when we export from Finale, it automatically goes into XML. I've switched from Finale to Sibelius. I don't know, 15 years ago, and when it first started switching, it was all jumbled up, but now it's much better. But I thought it just automatically went to XML.
In Finale, you go to convert, and then it says music XML.
Oh,
and that's the one you use. That's the one you use.
I think that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
That's probably the problem, because my guess is Finale had their own format of XML, and that wouldn't work. It has to be music XML, which is the official cross-platform, cross-application standard.
Yeah.
And is that a choice from Finale, or I thought it was automatic that it went to MUS?
No, you go to convert, and then that's one of the choices there.
Oh, I see. Well, I've got all my Finale scores converted many years ago. I learned the hard way because I sent one to somebody just from the Finale score, and it was missing notes and measures and everything. It was very embarrassing. So,
well, I usually do make a PDF of them before I send them to someone.
Yeah, that's what I do. I make all my scores come out, and if I'm submitting parts or I want musicians to actually have them, it's always in PDF because all those automatic those tablets and so forth, they all expect a PDF.
Yeah.
Well, I make mine into PDFs, but I want to be able to open my Finale files in Dorico, and that's why I want to convert them to XML.
But it should be music XML.
So it needs to be music XML. Okay.
Yes.
Well, maybe that's a critical feature then.
Yeah, I just did an export from Sibelius to Sibelius here on this quartet. So this is the original score from Sibelius, and if I go to the window here, let's see. Do. I thought I just opened. Let me just try something. I think it looked or correct. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, but I don't know.
XML.
I don't know how relevant to Finale that is, though.
I don't know. I was just trying to show a representation of if you have music XML that you export and music XML that you import, how much of what you exported you'll actually get back when you import it in.
Yeah.
So okay, hang on. I guess this is not going to work. Let's see what MuseScore does. Okay, so this is a pretty good test. This is in another application. Now I can see a couple of things it did that are pretty ugly. It decided this should be one measure over here. There might be one measure, but it decided it should go over the whole entire system. Oh, this is weird. It's left staff lines out for. That's really weird.
That problem with coming from Finale to Sibelius. Now I see you have cue notes in there, but when you play back, doesn't it play the cue notes in it?
No,
it doesn't.
And not in Sibelius.
Finale does.
Finale does. Okay, so maybe that's where I had the problem.
It took me, by the way, forever to figure out how to put cue notes in, and I finally had to go search online, and I did find it. It was pretty easy to find out, but the keyboard combination, you copy anything you want, and then when you paste, you have to control, it's like Command Control Alt Shift V or something.
Yeah.
It's so many keys. I had to use two hands to do it.
Wow.
It works. I mean, it does work, but like I don't remember what it is. Anytime I want to make cue notes, I have to go look it up again to remember what this ridiculous keyboard sequence is.
And that's in Sibelius?
That's in Sibelius.
Oh, well, in Sibelius, there's one of the what do we call it? The keypads. There's a specific one for cue notes, and it's very easy to do.
Is it really?
Oh yeah, and you can put it use it for grace notes and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think you have four I don't know what you call it in the keypad. You have four sections or levels, or I can't remember.
Oh, right. Yeah, I have used that for for grace notes and so forth, but I didn't know you could use those for cue
For
notes.
cues, yes, there's one just labeled cues.
Oh, I see. I'll have to try that the next time. Well, let's see.
Yeah, when I went from Finale to Sibelius, oh, all the work went away and it was just so much easier.
Well, no, I'm just showing MuseScore because we haven't actually looked at MuseScore to see. But what I'm seeing that MuseScore did is completely destroyed all the measure spacing I had and decided for no apparent reason that some measures should span an entire system.
Yeah.
And it got most of the symbols in there, but then every second measure here seems to be in the second row.
Now,
and then it made a whole page here with one system instead of three.
Yeah.
So it completely wrecked the layout.
So is this from Sibelius to MuseScore?
It's from Sibelius to MuseScore.
Huh.
Now, MuseScore is the free software, so I suppose maybe we should consider ourselves lucky that it worked at all in a piece of free software. But
yeah, I had a student who used MuseScore, and a lot of his scores that he sent to me look kind of like what this looks like.
So Brian, you said you went from Sibelius to MuseScore, but that's through the medium of Music XML, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And then look at this. I think this is supposed to be. What was this? I can't even tell what this is supposed to be. It doesn't make sense as I'll have to go back and look. I can't even figure out what this was, but it looks ugly, whatever it was.
I've gotten things like that from Finale to Sibelius, but I haven't moved anything from Sibelius to any place. So,
all right. Well, anyway.
Okay. Well, thanks for the demonstration.
So your mileage may vary, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Does anybody have other
migrating from Finale to Dorico? There's a Steinberg forum article that is extensive on it and goes into different branches. So that'd be a good resource if you go on to Dorico.
Oh, great! I see. Yeah, you put that in the chat. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's see. Anybody else have like general questions or concerns or frustration with the software they're using? Need any?
I could share a little bit about my experience with Dorico.
Sure. Love to hear it.
I'm coming from Sibelius as well, and I decided to move to Dorico when I started writing a piece that I knew that Sibelius and NotePerformer were not going to be able to handle very well. And that was a piece that had extensive percussion, like 4 different percussionists with lots of different percussion instruments and kind of a specialized setup. So anyway, I got into Dorico, and it took me probably most of a year, honestly, to get really up to speed with it. And it was in the course of writing this large multi-movement piece. And but in the end, it was able to do a really great job. I mean, definitely better than Sibelius would have been able to do, mainly because it was able to act more like a DAW and easily assign different instances, different VST instances to whatever instruments needed them to get the best sound possible. And, with the exception of a few things like cymbals on top of timpani, a very special sound that's not in any sample library.
That's right.
With that exception, I was able to get sound that really pretty closely approximated what I was looking for. And it was like a very difficult piece to get a decent sound out of. So I think the ability to act more like a DAW and assign custom sounds to it and develop expression maps and so forth, it's a lot of work in a way to do like a really full orchestra score with a special library. but like the movie music composers do. And they build these gigantic expression templates in Dorico to do
Right.
that. There is a company that is in the process of developing expression maps for Dorico. And I'm kind of waiting for that to come out before I start my next orchestra piece there, because then that would be like an automated way to get good expression out of a real sample library. Um, and, I've used for NotePerformer in Sibelius and in Dorico, and I like it a lot. It's like you say, for solo, I just wrote a string quartet, and for that, it's like, well, it's the same vibrato all the time, but it has a decent vibrato. It has a decent attack and release, but it's still not real strings by any stretch of the imagination. And I think you could probably do better if you really wanted to go down in Dorico to the level of assigning controller values, just like you can in the DAW. You can do that in Dorico. They have a special section where you can edit the MIDI that's sitting behind the notation in a very detailed way. I haven't gotten into that quite yet. And they also have kind of a seamless integration with their DAW, Cubase, where you can export a Dorico file into Cubase and have it be pretty perfectly represented and then start working on it from there. So I haven't gotten into that yet either, because I was a digital performer user for a long time.
Yeah.
So now it's like a learning curve to get into Cubase, but I think eventually I will do that and try to do that. So,
well, I will say that one of the reasons I got Sibelius was because I was a Pro Tools user for 20 some years, and it was advertised as having this interface or so forth with Pro Tools, and I was really rather disappointed. It really wasn't much of an interface at all. I mean, I could have exported MIDI and imported it and gotten the same results. So I was expecting something a little bit more, and it manifested because what it tried to do was kind of launch Sibelius inside of Pro Tools, like you put this score in as if it were a track somewhere, but you didn't really have any control over it. And then if you wanted to do something with it, then it just launched Sibelius to look at it. I thought it was pretty awkward, and it didn't work very well, and my computer got overloaded and thought things were it had a hard time making that work. They recently claimed to have made some improvements to it. I wasn't impressed. But I am curious because I wrote a piece that had 3 or 4 percussionists, and each percussionist had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different instruments they were alternating between. And in order to get the sound of all those instruments, I had to have a separate track, essentially a separate stave for every percussion instrument in order to get it to play back. And then I had to hide all those things because they weren't really part of the score, because the percussionist, I just had it all marked. It's like, okay, play, whatever it was, wood block here, right? And that's good enough for the percussionist. He says he'll just lay his stuff out so he can get to it. But in order to hear that, I had to have it in twice. I had to have it in the real score for the percussionist, and then I had to have a separate track where nothing happened for 45 measures, and then there's like a wood block. So yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, you have a lot of control over percussion kits in Dorico, and I had like four different percussion kits in this piece, and I ended up having to assign VSTs that were not NotePerformer to all of them, because NotePerformer is extremely limited in percussion. I mean, it has like basically one of each thing, and that's it, and they don't even have some of the things I wanted, like tempo blocks and some other things. And so it was just like hopeless to go with NotePerformer for that stuff. So I ended up really with a mix of NotePerformer and primarily Contact,
Oh yeah.
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 And the other thing is like the parts. So I mentioned before about the organizing things by players. So that makes like so much sense to me, more than the staves, So like in Sibelius, like each stave was a thing. And to have 2 clarinets on a stave, on one stave, and share a stave in an orchestra score, and then have them be separated out into parts was something that was quite difficult, but not so in Dorico. I mean, it's like
that's really good to know, because that is a nuisance in Sibelius. Just dealing with the individual parts, like you get 4 parts per stab if you want it, and getting all of that organized, I always end up hiding things that I don't want to see, because in piano notation, right, sometimes you have to represent things where someone's holding a note down and they're doing something else, and that is a part, but you don't want like rests for every part of that, right? The piano player knows they're gonna hold one finger down, and then in order to do that in Sibelius, you have to hide whatever rests they put in there, because they insist on having a rest or a note that represents all the available time in the measure for every individual part on a stave.
Every voice.
And Mark, can I ask a question? When you use different programs in a piece, how do you get a recording of the whole piece with everything together?
Oh, you go into an area of Dorico in the play mode, and that's where you assign instruments, like VST instruments. So I would assign different contact instances that were custom formed for that particular percussion kit or that instrument. And so I had, 5 different instances of contact assigned to different tracks, different players, the different instruments. You can even split out a percussion kit and have each element of the percussion kit go to a different instance if you really need that level of specificity. And then when you press play, it all plays. It's just all playing at the same time.
I mean, you can do that in Sibelius also, but it's much more awkward and obnoxious than it is in Dorico, as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was reading about when I started researching how to do this piece. It was like people were waving me off of doing it in Sibelius, and I felt like Dorico was the coming thing anyway, and so I thought, well, I'll just bite the bullet and do it, And it was a huge learning curve, and I don't deny that, but I think it's worth it anyway. That's my perspective.
I have another question. I don't understand what DAW is, and
okay, so DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation, and it refers to a type of software that would be used in, say, a recording studio like Pro Tools or Steinberg, in which you would use the software as essentially a tape recorder, and someone, if you have a string quartet, you'd have violin 1 on one track and violin 2 on another track, and the viola and so forth. And DAWs started out as just glorified tape recorders, and that was the capability for some time. And then they developed what's called the plug-in architecture, which meant you could have a electronic musical instrument, for instance, and that's what Mark and I are talking about when we say plugins. So the VST is a standard for a interface inside of music software. So if you say, I've got a plugin and I'm going to support this interface, then users can import those, right? And they can assign them to make the sound for something. And in a digital audio workstation, this has been common for a very long time. It's kind of a newer thing to composition software, and Dorico is really the only software that kind of supports it as a first-class idea. Sibelius kind of shoehorned it in through the back door because, they were competing with Dorico. But it just means that if you, for instance, in Dorico, you are writing for an instrument for which there's no built-in sound, but you can find something, a piece of software online that will make that sound. Like I want to write for, I don't know, gamelan or something, right? Well, so somebody makes a gamelan plugin. Well, you can buy the VST plugin, you can install it on your computer, and when you open up Dorico or Sibelius, you can say, well, here's my stave for gamelan. Now, I know you music notation software, you don't know how to play gamelan, but here, just when you have a note, go over and use this plugin over here and send the note over there and make it play it, because it knows how to play a gamelan sound. Now, it's this all comes from the technology of where people make music simply by recording things into their DAW and they never write anything down. That's the origin of all this. And for a lot of people, what a string quartet sounds like, and it's not, having good playback or having an instrument represent a particular sound or articulation so you can listen to it while you're writing the piece is not as important as it is to some other people. So it's a capability. I use it a lot. I like it. I can tell Mark uses it also. But other people, it's not something that's important to them. Some composers like writing things. They don't know what it's going to sound like. Who was it? There was a famous composer that I can't remember who it was. It might have been John Cage. Would write all these crazy scores, and people asked him, well, how do you even know what that's going to sound like? And he said, I don't know what it's going to sound like. I just want to find out. It seems like an interesting idea. I want to know what it's going to sound like when somebody tries to play it. That's kind of the other extreme of things, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by, that's probably a longer explanation than you wanted.
Well, I just wondered to install something like that on my computer. Is it going to take a lot of memory? Will I be able to do that?
If you have VSTs can require a lot of memory, but they're hosted by whatever software you're using, right? So they run inside of that software. So if you can run Finale or you can run Sibelius or Dorico on your computer, then you shouldn't have any trouble with plugins, unless you use a whole bunch of them. So it's relatively simple. I can show you.
You really should have about 32 gigabytes of RAM and, a pretty decent processor. The processor is really important.
If your computer is more than 10 years old, you will have trouble.
Oh, no, it's not. It's not, yeah.
But just to show you how they do it here. So we were talking about VST. All of these plugins here, these are all plugins that Sibelius found installed on my desk. It also found the Microsoft GS Wavetable synth, which is something that's built into Windows. It found the OB6 and the Nord Electro 5 MIDI, which are actual physical keyboards and devices I have just to my left. They're plugged in via MIDI into my computer. So it found those also. And then these are all, here's NotePerformer, which is just a VST plugin. And these other instruments, which these were really cheap and I don't recommend them. They don't really sound anything like a cello, viola, or violin. I have a Mellotron. And some of these other things are all just for other software I have on my computer. But the way VST works is you install it in one place, and any application that's looking for a VST plugin is going to go look in a special place, and it's going to say, aha, there they are. And it's going to load them all up into memory so you can use them. But in Sibelius, in order to use these, you have to go activate them. It's kind of a lot of work. And so then you have to, once this is here, then you have to go through here and assign all this stuff, which really ought to be, it ought to be that you can say, here's all the staves in my score. I have a stave called, violin 2. Now, pick that stave, right? And when you see a note on that stave, go use this thing here, right? To play the music. But it's not that simple in Sibelius, because nothing's ever that simple in Sibelius. And it's a huge amount of configuration I have actually not bothered with, because I use NotePerformer, and that handles it for 99.99% of the time that in cases that I have for the music I write in Sibelius. So I don't really use these other things, but you can.
Yes, I think I'll get NotePerformer. I think I probably need that.
it's a really good investment. Well,
I agree. It is a very good investment. I'm very happy.
Well, as always, I learned a lot. Every presentation is a.
Well, I learned a lot too. I was surprised that I could have put those Q notes in using the menu in Sibelius. So there you go.
Yeah.
It might be fun to do this on a periodic basis, Liz, because it seems like there was a good exchange of information. So, who knows?
Yes, and I heard from some people that couldn't make it tonight, and are looking forward to seeing the video.
Okay.
It's knowledge that we all need.
Great. Well, I'm glad this was helpful.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Brian.
thank you. All right. Well, have a good evening, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.